Welcome to Pay Attention, interviews about truth in troubling times. And today my guest is Amina Motala, and she's a podcaster and a conservative commentator whose expertise ranges from blockchain and cryptocurrencies to larger platforms of meaning about what is on the horizon for us in the next couple of decades. Amina is definitely a truth warrior, and she comes from a couple of generations of truth warriors in her family. Amina is Canadian, and her family comes from South Africa, and I very much welcome her being on Pay Attention because she's an extraordinary truth teller, and I know her personally. So welcome, Amina. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Polly. It's a pleasure to be here on your show with you. So I really am quite excited to have this conversation today. Thank you.
So first, I'd like listeners to understand a little bit about your personal history and also about your dedication to truth, because I think it will frame everything that we go into today. So when I met you in Vermont a little while ago, it was more than a year ago, I think, you told me that your grandfather was a close friend of Nelson Mandela's and also knew Gandhi. And I wonder if you could tell us about your family, how your work right now intersects with your family's history and why that heritage is important to you in your own crusade for truth.
I was born in South Africa, in Durban, South Africa, and we go back a few generations in South Africa. So my father's side, which is my grandfather that you mentioned, his father, he was a freedom fighter in the 60s in South Africa. And he did a lot of work towards that and making that movement for himself and people. He was also working with others and teaching others and camping out with others during that time, which was a very precarious time for them. And it was I believe it was his cousin or second cousin, which would have been like a second uncle to my father, who was Dr. Motala, who was best friends with Mandela. And that's the family member connected to us. And this man and Mandela were very close. And during those times, it was at his very last moments when Mandela was free, he had come to my relative's home and stayed there for a little bit. And during that time, my relative, Dr. Motala, had said to him, "Stay with us. We need to protect you and keep you safe," because at that time he was running from the party and his life was in danger. So he refused to stay there with them because he felt that it would have kept them in some sort of danger had he had stayed in their home. So he was persistent to leave. And he did leave, and shortly after, at that time, they had imprisoned him. They had captured him and imprisoned him.
So your relatives had a long history of fighting against apartheid and for the ANC, I assume. That was the history there. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were fighting for their freedoms, against the apartheid. My grandfather was very prominent in that, and as well as Dr. Motala. Some other family members helped in other ways, for sure. My father directly wasn't, as he was younger, but he was raised in that thinking and that understanding and that openness of thought. There was, when Mandela came out of prison, I don't know if he did it after, he named one of the streets in Pretoria, South Africa, after him, and it's called Motala Street. It's there. Mm-hmm. We went and saw it and took the picture. Yeah, but
and how old were you? How old were you when you left South Africa for Canada?
I would have been a baby. So what happened is, when he had to leave South Africa, they went up to Kenya, Nairobi, and they were living in Kenya. And there, my grandfather had established a company called Dan River Clothing, which he did men's, sort of like a designer line clothing for men. And he was well connected with government. and officials and generals and ministers and things like that. So he had a prominent, in part of that prominent society where he entertained a lot of these people in his home. There, my grandfather had attempted to start his own government, I would, if you want to call it that, with the individuals of like-mindedness there that he was connected with. In his home, he had a soundproof living room, and they used to come and sit in there and have their meetings and their discussions there. So this is the late 60s, and he at one time during some of these dinners and meetings, he was either he somehow was able to get information or heard a conversation whereby he detected a coup was about to happen, and he needed to warn others, that there's unrest about to happen here. So, which he did. And during that time, actually, as the story goes, I remember my dad telling me it was about 5 a.m. in the morning, and my grandfather had woken him up and said, "You need to call the general for me, get the general on the phone." And my father said to him, "Are you sure you want me to do this? Because it's 5 a.m., Dad." And he said, "Do it now." So when my grandfather speaks like that, my dad knew it was serious, and he had to do this. So he called the general, and the general wasn't pleased to have the call that early in the morning. And he said, "This better be good." And he said, "My father wants to speak with you." And as soon as he mentioned my grandfather's name, he said, "Okay, I'm listening." So that's how much respect he had from everybody.
And did you then, was it through that intervention and was that a coup or something? Was that the reason why you guys left Nairobi, or?
Correct. So after that, my grandfather was very wise in informing them, because the coup did occur. And within minutes after that phone call, his house was secured with the proper security. The generals had, made sure he was protected. They knew what was going on and the seriousness of it, and it was basically a takeover. And so they had to flee out of there very quickly, because they were in a losing position at that point.
And then your family went to Canada from Nairobi?
Well, not directly. No, what they did was they flew out to Spain, and they stayed there for a while, and in Morocco. So they were in Casablanca and Madrid. And they were there for about a year in total. And while they were there, they were applying for immigration status to either Australia or Canada. And at the time, Canadian paperwork for immigration was much faster. They were building up the country a little bit faster than Australia. So that was moved a lot quicker. So that was why we came towards this way. It would have been Australia otherwise, which I kind of but oh well.
So how old were you when you came to Canada then?
So then by that point I was 18 months. So I have no memory of any of this. Just stories that were told to me growing up. So I was definitely a baby, and we lived in Toronto, and we stayed in Toronto till I was about 7, and then moved to Ottawa, where I remained for the rest of my years. And my grandfather, everyone, they moved here as well. So
so in growing up in Ottawa, primarily Toronto, Ottawa, you heard the stories of your family, and you would maybe sometimes your father would talk about it, or I don't know if your grandfather came along, or did your grandfather come with you or not?
He was in Toronto. He was based in Toronto. He did. It's a very close family and a big family, so everyone actually did move to Canada from there. And everyone broke up from East Africa and went their way, and whoever could get to whatever country. So eventually, over the year or two, everyone was ended up in Toronto.
Right.
Yeah.
And your family is originally from India, or mostly over generations in South Africa?
It's over generations in South Africa, and
Right.
my mother's side, her mother is actually Persian, Afghani Persian.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
my mother's father is from India. He immigrated from India. He actually snuck on a ship at 18 years old and got over to South Africa.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
he established himself and became a pretty successful entrepreneur in South Africa. My mother's mother is multi-generational, few generations. And then my father's side is a few generations in South Africa.
So then let's come up to the present right now. Do you identify primarily as Canadian? I mean, how do you think of your own sort of ethnic, cultural, or whatever, that side of family identity? Does it seem like it's Canadian, or how does it seem to you?
Mhm. Well, I was raised here, since a baby, so I'm very much Canadian. I'm now 52 years old, so I have, 50 years here. So it's definitely part of who I am and
Right.
how I think and what I do. But having said that, I was raised in a home with a very strong culture, and culture is very important. And so my parents did their best as they could in this. You do become a product of your environment. This is
Yes.
this
Yes.
is this is the nature's law, right? So
Right.
they did their very best to keep the culture strong in the home. So I learned a lot about culture, religion, which I grew up in a Muslim home. I learned a lot about just different values, that they brought from their home and their traditions, and including food and all sorts of wonderful things.
Yes.
So I gained a lot that way. Yeah, I feel, and I could see the difference between myself and my friends. Sometimes how we were thinking, even. And like I said, like I was raised with all these stories that they told me growing up. So my mind is, I see the world as we all have different bubbles in these countries. And
Yes.
given the knowledge that I've learned over time from many interesting people that I, haven't had conversations with, we do have bubbles, and we do have a certain way that certain countries are that evolve, and there is some control over that, no doubt. And I felt that, being in this culture, Canadian culture, and being raised in a culture in my home, I could see differences a little bit easier because, again, a different perspective is how I'm being molded. It is a molding, right?
Yes, yes, it is. And it is. And also the issues that, do you still practice Islam in any way, or do you just see it as your background? How is that for you?
Yeah, I see it as my I hate to say my background. I mean, I had told my parents one day I'm no longer in the religion, but I'm very spiritual, and I believe I have a creator, which is very, very close to me. And I respect everything they taught me and what they do because there's value in all of it.
Yes,
And,
absolutely. And I think also having a tradition in a family that is a strong tradition really means something different than growing up where the parents might be agnostic or atheist. They don't have a tradition. It's very different. If your parents have a tradition, you grow up with certain kinds of not just expectations, but also rules to live by.
yes,
That there are certain
exactly.
ways that you should be in life. And it usually involves, telling the truth, not stealing, and generally not killing or not doing things that are violent. And so from my point of view as a psychologist and a
Mhm.
developmental psychologist, I think that when baby boomers in North America turned against their childhood religions, they lost a lot.
Mhm.
They walked away from traditions, they walked away from churches, they walked away from temples, where there was community in setting out what it means to be a human being, what it means to have a community, to be trustworthy, to function by these basic rules or laws that I think are necessary for humans. So walking away from those traditions, At the time, we thought that we were somehow getting greater freedom. And I think that instead what happened is we got greater confusion. And that has been a problem for the next generation, in finding out what are the rules for living, what makes a good life, what gives you a sense of satisfaction and happiness. You have to have a purpose in life in order for it to be good at all, because everybody's life is difficult, and because we're all, as humans, we're all going to die. We all have an impermanence that's very definite, a sell by date or whatever. And if you don't have a deeper purpose, it can all seem like it's pretty negative or pretty nihilistic or pretty, personal, that only your own personal protection matters. So I think that having grown up in a family with a religious tradition actually gives you a big boost in life. And I always taken up my opportunities to say that, because it's hard for people to actually understand their purpose in life without some rules to live by.
Absolutely. And everything you just said, I agree wholeheartedly. It has given me exactly that. And I do feel sometimes privileged over others that don't have the two. And because having many perspectives gives you an ability to think a little bit more and more critically and more clear, and more with more depth. And I think it's the depth that we lack in this generational lack of, handing down the storytelling and the teachings.
Right.
And it comes to a point where, are we in our societies a little bit lost because of this? So
Oh, yeah. I mean, I certainly think, so I wondered just to spend a moment, and then we're going to go into talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency,
Sure.
which is one of your expert areas that a lot of people don't understand at all. But just to spend a moment on this issue of something that you and I share as truth seekers or true crusaders for truth, what's going on now in the most powerful governments in the world. And that includes the US government, which is a very imperialistic government, in my view, in any case, that there is a problem with corruption, and with the corruption, not just of the government, but of the media. And so it's very hard for people, ordinary people, who are good people, who do want to follow the rules and want to play by the rules. It's hard for them to understand what the truth is. It's like there are so many layers of half truths or lies. Often it's more like half truth or manipulation of truth, that people are confused about many of the issues that we're facing that have to do with things like the COVID, virus, and how governments are responding to it, that have to do with money and the way money intersects with morality, and that have to do with what the future holds after these huge lockdowns in so many countries where the economies have just bottomed out, as a result of the lockdown. So I wondered if you could say just a little bit about your own crusade for truth, why you think it's important, and now maybe we can see it in terms of your background as well.
Yeah, first I'd like to just say that, for me to see, going back to my grandfather, he was a visionary. And given that he did what he did and had those connections and so on, and it's because he was a visionary. And I feel that I inherited that, because I feel like I have those visionary abilities. And it's hard to sometimes explain these things, but it's probably why I ended up in this blockchain technology as early as I did, because I was able to see something here in this for our future. And I've always seen something a little bit differently. I think always my whole life I've been that way, where I would look at somebody or my friends, my peers, and think, I don't understand why they say that or think that way. Like I just
Mm.
couldn't fully connect because I was always seeing something a different way or in a different angle. And that's something I came to learn over time. It took a long time actually, because you always just want to be, part of your environment and be with
Right.
like your peers, right?
That's right. 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 Well,
So, yeah.
I'm very similar. I have a life really of, um, I do a lot of things in my life and I've been very successful, but I've never played into the mainstream or the conventional world or the world even of material assets that are, that being the focus. And so I have also the sense that the path of life requires certain kinds of very sincere engagements
Mhm.
on the part of every individual. And a lot of people wouldn't agree with that. But I think your own right to speak openly, to have freedom of speech, and to think and to reason, I think those are the underlying necessities for human development.
Mhm.
And so, I grew up in a working class environment. Neither of my parents actually even went to high school. And I'm just publishing my 19th book. So that's kind of a big gap from
Mhm.
growing up in a household where my parents finished the 8th grade and then they had to go to work and they were working in a factory. But I was able to follow my own mind by going to school and studying hard. I started to discover there was a way to understand life that was different from my peers and from my parents. For one reason or another, I quickly established my own authority over their authority, and it of course had some drawbacks for a long time, but it let me really rely on my own mind and not ask permission to have a mind. So that was the great advantage of it. I think that when people really do use the kind of deeper intelligence of being human, which does involve intuition or using the unconscious mind, so-called unconscious mind, as well as the conscious mind, when they use that, they can find their way in a different way than by complying with peers or just complying with rules. There are rules for living, and there are rules also that actually move away from living. you know. So I do think you and I have a rapport in regard to the issues of, let's say, looking at things from a different perspective than many of our peers, and our peers are a different cohort.
Mhm.
But so I really appreciate that about you. Uh, and I also appreciate the fact that you have been willing to try to uncover the truth in a time of great confusion.
Mhm. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, and
That's right.
it's really not. And we are in a very confusing time. I think the way I see things, and not everyone may agree, but I can only share my life experience, what's come to me, what I've learned over time on my own research, and the people that I've met. And I can only share that, like each and every one of us can do, and put
Right.
our part in our purposes together, and then look at it collectively. I think that is a way to go about things, rather than
Yes.
saying my way is right, your way is wrong, and
Right.
or calling each other names or what have you, or walking away and ignoring and shutting it off. They like to call that crickets. It means there's silence, and
Right.
that's not a way either. We have to communicate. We are a herd type of creatures. We need
Right.
to have that communication, and like you say, with rationality and with reasoning, it is so important
Right.
to go about it that way. We've lost a lot of these values, especially in our millennials, and our Gen Z young generation. So
Right.
teaching
Yes.
these skills back to them or modeling to them again, and not being afraid to model to them. Because honestly, what I've learned over time, and this is the part that I'll share with those, so please lend an ear to listen and hear my perspective, is that, you know, these young generations, we are compartmentalized. Everything is compartmentalized, and it's part of the programming of how they are creating these societies. And
Right.
this compartmentalization goes in all facets, even in military. And
Right.
that's how they
Right.
hold control. And when I say they, there is a hierarchy on this planet. There is a control system. There are people in power, and there are fewer people in power at the very top of this.
Yes.
So this is
It
very
looks
real.
it looks very much like we're, you know, this is the moment that we're in right now. It might change, but I did take the time to read the book that's called, you know, COVID-19, The Great Reset,
Mhm,
which is was published by the World Economic Forum.
mhm.
And these are very elite leaders that are a part of a movement towards global governance and transhumanism.
Yeah,
And many people, many media people say that that is a conspiracy theory, but of course it is not, because they publish their treatise online. You can read
exactly.
it. You can read exactly what they're planning. You can understand how it fits in with transhumanism, and then you can see what's happening right now.
I'd
And
like to add 2 points to that, if I may.
sure.
And one is the reason why a lot of people will say that's conspiracy theory, and like you just said, but it isn't, because they've put it out there in their documents publicly,
Right.
right? From the World Health Forum, and so on and so on. So that is there, but yet people still say it's conspiracy. I just had a gentleman tell me that yesterday in a post on social media, and he kept saying, "Oh, that's all conspiracy." And I thought, well, I just told you that Prime Minister Trudeau said this in an announcement. How is that conspiracy theory? So
Right.
why are they saying that? This is where we have to ask questions. It's really important to ask questions. Why would they say that that is conspiracy theory? And part of what I can answer to that, in part answer to that, is that it is called a hypnosis. It is literally a hypnosis that people are under. This is why you can't rationalize why they are responding the way they are responding, because they are programmed. So there are certain trigger words in hypnosis that when a trigger word is said, they respond a certain way. And this is programmed, and it's called MK Ultra mind control. And it's very,
Yeah, it's
very
it's
real.
it's difficult for people to understand that MK Ultra has been around for a long time, and some parts of it were developed in Montreal. Actually, there was an
Exactly.
institute there in Montreal, and all of this you can look up on Wikipedia. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
you can.
it's
Yeah,
not
it's
a
all there
secret.
to be
Yeah,
researched.
it's not a
But the
secret.
second part that I wanted to say to that is that Klaus Schwab is one of those individuals
He's one
behind
of the authors of the book. Yes.
exactly. And I call him Dr. Evil. And I say that because he looks like the character Dr. Evil, a classic exact replica, actually, with the accent and everything. So it's hard not to it's a bit of humor, so please.
Yeah.
But they say, they are telling you, like you say, it's written in their documentation, it is public. You can go and look this up, and you can read all about Agenda 30. You can read all about what they plan on doing with the global reset and what they want to do with the world population. It's all there, it's all public. And the reason why is because they have to, according to international law and universal law, in order for it to manifest and to be created as law in the world, you have to put it out there. And that's part of law. So they put it out there. They know how this works. So if you take that into consideration, that yes, you can go and see exactly what they're doing, and what, that they're not conspiracy theories. And if you look at the hypnosis that I'm talking about, and you put the two together, start putting the dots together. This is how we have to start connecting things and looking at things and looking at it in a different perspective in our critical thinking. So I just wanted to
So
say that.
partly, you know, when you say hypnosis, and I know a lot of people would say, what do you mean hypnosis? Carl Jung talked about what he called a psychological complex as a kind of trance state. And a psychological complex is when you're motivated by emotions, and often fear is one of those emotions, to hear and see things in a certain way, not sort of more openly or in a relaxed way, but more in a distorted way. So the way that I would say things are happening for people, there are various kinds of media that are connected to the Great Reset, and that they have been promoting various kinds of fear and various kinds of confusion for a long enough time that ordinary people get wrapped up in psychological complexes that are like trances. So then they can't really see things clearly. They can't hear things clearly. And mostly they can't hear certain kinds of things that set off triggers. And those triggers then make it impossible for them to actually take a step back. And I think this is probably what you mean by hypnosis. It's, you know, the term hypnosis is a kind of broad term because most people have not actually been put under a hypnotic spell. If you have been, and I have been, you realize that while you're being put under the spell, you also think, oh, I know I'm being put under hypnosis. In other words, you don't lose your consciousness.
Right.
You actually know
You're willing.
you're
right.
doing this willingly. And so it's not as though somebody knocks you over the head and puts you under a spell. You join with it. And that's the way you go under a hypnotic spell or a hypnotic trance. And sometimes people do that to say, stop smoking, or they do it to lose weight, or they do it for other, let's say, health-related benefits. And hypnosis has been effective for certain kinds of benefits. But also it can be done to you when you're afraid and you're confused. You can willingly go in to a trance state, and you don't know that you're in it, but you sort of know. You're kind of like, well, that doesn't make sense, but okay, I'll trust it. And so I think it's important to kind of unpack that for people. So when you say hypnosis and you say MK Ultra, they understand that this isn't a matter of hitting you over the head.
Right. Yeah.
It's more of a cultivated fear state where over time you basically believe things without questioning them, and you assume something must be true because certain people have said it, or you assume something must not be true because certain people have said it's not true. So you stop thinking yourself
Right. Yeah.
about,
You said it,
what's
say
the
it very
logic
well.
of this. Yeah, right.
You say it
So
very well and very clearly. Thank you for that. I appreciate it, even for myself, to hear it that way. And you're right. And it's in layers, correct? So they bring
yes,
information in layers.
yes, that's right. That's right. And so then over time, once there's a larger number of people conforming to a particular ideology, like, you know, you could see that as, let's say, the Nazi ideology took over slowly in Europe. It wasn't as though one day everybody woke up and said, oh, I believe this. It was slow. And what I see happening now is that in relation to certain issues, the first one, 9/11 and terrorism, the second one, the COVID virus, there's a very, very clear part of media to make people as afraid as possible, and in that fear to become confused. So, for example, after 9/11, people were very afraid of terrorism. They were very afraid of terrorism coming to Vermont, you know, of terrorism coming to your local town. And now when we look back at it, it looks bizarre. But when you actually review, like Michael Moore's movie 9/11, Fahrenheit 9/11, that movie puts together a lot of the media that was going on after 9/11, and you just see the same narrative that was unfolding at the beginning of the COVID thing. You know, it's like, we have to do these things to protect ourselves. We have to give up these rights. We have to follow these policies, and it has to happen, or we're all actually at terrible risk. And so that narrative was laid out, you know, really in the early 2000s, and it's been unfolding since then. And again, if you look at the COVID-19, the Great Reset by Schwab and others, you'll see how this whole narrative works, and where they want it to go. And you know, and whether their vision is something they truly deeply believe is a solution for the world, which I don't know, it's possible, I don't know them personally, you know, or or if it's just a manipulation of the world for only evil means, it doesn't matter. Because one way or the other, it is the manipulation of our ability to think clearly that's the issue. Whether they see it as a salvation or they see it as a damnation, to me, it doesn't matter, because I don't know them personally, you know. And so I have to say that I see what's going on as a terrible psychological loss to people's ability to speak freely and think for themselves, and a tremendous promotion of polarization and destruction, even within families, and certainly between communities, and certainly between people who think differently, where we really need to talk to each other. There is this polarization and this fear about talking to each other. So
it's dangerous, actually. And
it's very dangerous.
Family, you know, the family unit is a very strong element for human beings, and it is essential. And I think they know this. And why else are we being attacked this way? You know, and that's how I think. And this is what I look at, because, you know, why attack the family unit? Why divide us? What is the purpose of this?
Right.
You know, anything, it would make you stronger, even if there was a disease, to combat it and to fight it and to work together. So it doesn't make any sense.
Right, to divide the two sides. Yeah. And to have people divided all over the place because of their beliefs and opinions about what is right. Well, both sides are needed. Both sides are needed. You can't actually find any kind of solution without having the different sides. And it's that effect that is the biggest effect of polarization right now, you know, in North America, certainly in the US, and I imagine in Canada also. It's very difficult to have an open conversation about many of the issues that we're facing.
It's Canadians are, again, going back to each bubble of each country that's been evolved. And this is very orchestrated by these people, these elites. I think for Canadians, they have created a very passive aggressive society. We're very passive individuals here. You know, we're known to always say sorry. You know, it's a kind of a joke, but it's more than that. And, you know, now that we're here in these times, these types of characteristics, you can see it very clearly, you know, and it's anyone who has some sort of truth or awareness, more awareness than the average general population, which there is. You know, we're very, you see it in public. I see it all the time. And that trance that you speak of when I refer to hypnosis, but it is a trance, you know, where you just hear one thing and then hear another, and then you know that you must say this next and this next because you've heard it somewhere. Really, you're not thinking for yourself.
Right.
So you see a lot of that, and the narcissism has grown tremendously in our societies as well. And that's probably to certain degrees too. You know, I can speak a little bit about narcissism, but I'm sure you have a lot more from your professional perspective on that. But it lends to what they call the Karens out there, the people that want to tell you what they think is right and wrong. And they feel they have the right to tell you, you are doing wrong. Your mask is not on properly. Could you please put it on properly? And you think, well, why would you come up to me and tell me that? What are you gaining by that?
Right.
You're
Right.
doing it aggressively. This is the
Right.
passive aggressive,
Yeah.
and I think so. And it's what I've observed. It's very prevalent here in Canada, and
Yeah.
it makes them very easy prey to program or to steer, where they want them to go next each time. And now, you know, I speak with members of parliament in the Conservative Party here, and these are individuals that I feel are seeing things the way in this awareness that I speak of. And they have told me very clearly, they told me this back in September, we are going under a dictatorship, and this
Mm.
is serious, and we really
Mhm.
do need to do something. And they're
You mean in the Trudeau
no, in
government,
the Conservative government, so
in
the
the
opposing
cons
party. Mhm.
but you're saying that the Conservatives are saying that which is the where is the dictatorship?
The Canadian dictatorship is happening in the Liberal Party.
That's what I thought you meant.
Yes,
In the Trudeau government
correct,
is becoming a dictatorship, and
correct.
that the Conservatives could see that happening even as of last September or so.
Absolutely. And in
Okay.
September, I know, I can't mention names, but I was told that this is going to take about 6 months and we will be under a full dictatorship. So we have to work quickly at doing things. And they're reaching out to people like myself, where I have some sort of voice with the public as independent media, because they are reaching to independent media where the power is directly to the people. That's
Hmm.
more effective rather than media like you speak of, where it's
Yes. Right.
compromised, right?
Right.
So they're
Right.
not going to
Right.
media, they're going to
Right.
the independents. Because I also
Interesting.
correspond with a 2-star major retired general in the United States, and a 3-star lieutenant general, General McKinnery, and then General Paul Valley is the other one. So I have those connections where they are staying in touch with us here in Canada,
Hmm.
so to speak, at the ground level, right? And
Mhm.
they are very concerned about, and they see exactly what I'm saying. They see the threats from China. We have a
Mhm.
lot of Chinese threats here in Canada,
Mhm.
as well as in the United States, and it's very concerning. And you should
Mhm.
look at this. I think it's really important because this is our country and this is a Chinese communist country. So
Mhm.
why do they have such vested interest in our countries? And why are
Mhm.
they infiltrating as they are in our countries? We have Canadian soldiers training Chinese soldiers on our ground here in our towns.
Mhm. I have
And
heard that. I have heard that, and it's it's difficult for I think for Americans to know how to check that out. The statements about Chinese military being in Canada. Um, I don't know. I don't want to go too far afield of our topic of money, so I'm going to come back. But
Mhm.
is there a way that people can check out what you said about the Chinese military being in Canada? Is there a website or a place or?
Sure, they can go to standupamericaus.org. And this is the general's website. He does have numerous articles with links attached to it with the China threats for the United States. So,
Mhm.
and we have Canadian articles we're writing, they're in there as well.
Okay.
But we've provided him with articles and links as well. So you can reference standupamericaus.org.
.org. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. And so people can look there for themselves on
yeah,
information about Chinese military training in Canada. Is that the
correct.
idea?
You'll see
Okay.
generals being awarded medals, and we have Chinese mafia infiltrated heavily in Vancouver, British Columbia. We have them buying up a lot of our farmland and corporations. And this is very real, very, very real. And our Trudeau government has always spoken openly and publicly that he agrees with communism and what it stands for. So
Okay.
they can research that. I'm sure they'll find it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. And I certainly have heard these ideas before, but I haven't really talked to anybody in Canada who is in independent media. So it's interesting to talk with you about that. But I do want to kind of switch over now to blockchain and cryptocurrency,
Sure.
because, I have already talked to particularly Fabian Grummus, who you might know him. He's a German businessman who's married to a Chinese woman and Fabian is in Hong Kong, I think, right now, because he can't go back into mainland China for a variety of reasons, even though his wife is and his son are in mainland China. But I talked to him about morality and money and the future of money.
Mhm.
And we talked about the Austrian Economic Institute, von Mises, and so on, which was a very interesting conversation. And what I'd like to do is to talk with you about why you came to believe in blockchain, and then to tell people what blockchain is.
Mhm.
And then also what it's like blockchain and cryptocurrency aren't exactly the same thing, but they're related. And a little bit about how this form of money also corresponds with the issues that we've been talking about: morality, truth, government, so can you tell us about what blockchain is, why you believe in it, and then on to cryptocurrency?
Sure. So going, as a visionary that I am, I discovered, actually it was Bitcoin that through my searching on the internet years ago, many, many years ago, probably 2012, actually. And I was searching all kinds of things, and this documentary came up. It was about Bitcoin, and I learned a little bit about it, and I thought, wow, how fascinating. So, it was split for me. Part of my mind said, I wonder who created this. If it's the good guys or the bad guys, of course, it's money. And wow, what a concept. Like, this actually looks like it's money for the people. But,
so could you tell me, when you said what a good idea, what was it that drew you to it, right, even in 2012?
Well, the way they explained it is that it was a currency that you can use peer-to-peer, person to person. And you are then your own bank. So you are not relying on a third party, on a middleman. And this transparency to these transactions, where it's transparent. So I can see where the transaction is coming from, where it came from, where it's going to, and so on. And it's on a chain, which is a ledger. Let's say the blockchain is a ledger. And this blockchain ledger is transparent. So you see all your transactions, where they've all come from, where they all go to. So for me, part of that it really caught my attention. But again, I'm this visionary, right? So I actually can see things. I see beyond. I see the depth, and I had a voice literally come right through me saying, "This is it." And I thought, well, what is it? But it felt right. There's something about it felt right. And I said, I need to keep looking into this, and I really need to get some to hold it, to invest in it, to understand it. That's how I can understand it. So I didn't, because I did try. I typed how to buy Bitcoin, and it was way too complicated because I didn't have a lot of IT experience. And back then, you basically had to download the entire blockchain on your computer. There's no way I would have been able to do that. So years went by, but in the back of my mind, I had this little voice that kept saying, you really should go get some of this and look more into it. And I heard of an ATM machine that came up in Ottawa, and I thought, I should go downtown and get some. And I never did until 2017. And when I actually did and seriously thought about investing in it, I learned better what the concept of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, how, because it had increased in value, and I didn't understand all that. I didn't realize that that's what it was doing. So I started learning and educating a lot more, and I really invested myself in the education of it. And I ended up actually even starting a meetup in Ottawa, and I did that bi-weekly for about 2.5 years.
So could you explain to ordinary people who also would not be able to understand the technology or the IT component. Can you just say, first of all, why 2017? What was happening then? But also, what is this? We'll just stick with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is kind of the name that people use for cryptocurrency, even if there are many kinds of cryptocurrencies. But just to ordinary people, what is so compelling about this? Why did you love it? And what happened in 2017 that you got heavily involved?
Well, I think, like I said, that was initially the first time I learned about it. And so by 2017, that interest didn't die away. It was still there for me. So I still wanted to be invested. It just so happened that I happened to be doing it in the year of the bull run, where it was going up in value quite fast from, say, September on till December, which a lot more people learned about. Bitcoin being, $19,000 worth US or whatever it was.
Right.
So, that as I started learning more and investing from that initial interest, of course, I learned even more value behind it. And it was just the empowerment of what it was to have a currency for the people. So I started learning on exchanges and seeing the trading going on in exchanges, live trades with the cryptocurrencies. And what I saw in front of me was incredible, because I saw an absolute free market. It wasn't manipulated yet. And that's a rare thing to see. You've never seen that. But
I think a lot of people don't understand. Just again, maybe they understand how the stock market is manipulated a little bit.
A lot.
I mean, people may only understand a little bit. They don't understand the whole thing. I mean, the whole thing of the stock market is so manipulated that it has no reality at all now. I mean, it's completely AI based stuff that can almost not be understood by people. But so blockchain and cryptocurrency, when you say money for the people, you mean that it eliminates the banks, it eliminates the central banks and the Federal Reserve. And so, but it does have, and it has had a lot of scammy stuff associated with it because of the people, and there were people who were dishonest and people who were honest investing in Bitcoin. So I wonder if you could just again kind of tell us about
this is a great point, because this is what the media has put out mostly about it. And again, when you're getting information from the media, you're being disinformed. So remember this, as we spoke about the media.
From the mainstream media.
Mainstream media.
Yeah, right.
And they're, of course, because especially it's currency. So currency is going to be very much disinformation when you're going through a transition of one currency into another, which we've never done before. So, those who control currency control the world. It's a very simple statement, but it's a very true statement. And that's in the system, the draconian system that we live in, that's how it works. So if this currency is coming into our hands where we are peer-to-peer using it, there's a value to that. There's an intrinsic value to that, and the value is the recording of the transaction becomes formulated. It's a recorded transaction on the blockchain. So each transaction that moves on the blockchain creates a block on the chain, which is called a hash. The transaction is the hash. The last block that was created has a hash. So there are miners or nodes all around the world. When a transaction is made, it starts to work as a consensus to create that hash, that transaction for you. And then it is combined with the last block, that hash, and those two are combined to create a new hash. So it creates a chain. So you've got a block connecting to the next block, and that's how it's done. If I can explain it in simple ways, and then you have this chain being connected and formed, and it's a ledger. So having said all that,
isn't that open to corruption though as well? Yeah.
So to talk on that, of course it is. But let's expand our thoughts. Corruption exists with fiat currency just the same.
Right. So do you think
And
that
we use fiat currency on a daily basis for everything.
right?
So where I see the value is that we take this into the Bitcoin cryptocurrency world. And yes, you have your criminals, and yes, there is stuff going on there because it is developing and it's evolving. And those who want to use an open source technology to create whatever they want to create, if they want to create good from it or bad from it, it will be done. That's inevitable in anything. And of course, that's going to be happening. So it's only emphasized by those who don't want you in it right now. So that's just emphasized to us right now. But I do feel that if enough of us, we have to collectively, consciously get invested in our lives again. We're not, because we're programmed, like we spoke of earlier. We're told what to think and how to think next and what to do next. And this is what will happen and this is what you do. But I feel that we need to collectively think on terms of how can we take some of these technologies like Bitcoin, perhaps it will be, perhaps it won't be, but we can learn from this, we can use it, and we can start using collectively our ways, what we want for ourselves collectively as human beings, because we are the laborers and the force behind all of this, behind the engine that they've created.
So the one thing that, there are several ways different directions that we could take here. And I want to take one direction and then maybe another one. But the first one is, why is Bitcoin valuable? Where does its value come from? And then we're going to I want to talk a little bit about precious metals, which is what Fabian Grumas talked to me about, but let's start out with because a lot of people don't understand how cryptocurrency has any value. And of course, none of the stocks have real value these days. They're not related by and large to the actual companies or to their actual products. They have departed from the actual industries and products that the stocks are named after. But there was at least a logic that people originally followed, that if you're buying a stock from Procter and Gamble, it relates to the products of Procter and Gamble. And I know that has changed, but again, that logic allowed people to understand why the stock might be valuable. But when it comes to cryptocurrency, people say, well, where does the value come from? Yeah. Sure. So can you explain that first?
Because we've been taught that gold backs up the dollar. There's a value there, which it doesn't. It hasn't.
No, I'm aware that it doesn't.
Right.
But
but a lot of people think it still does. So that's why I just wanted to say that. So
right. We'll talk about that too.
Sure.
In a minute. But what is it that would give cryptocurrency value? Obviously, consensus gives money value, and initially probably money really didn't fully exist. People just traded goods, and then they began to use that idea that something stands in for the goods because they wanted to borrow. At least that's the way it looks from anthropology, that instead of giving you 3 barrels of corn when you give me 2 barrels of cucumbers or whatever, I can't grow the corn right now, so can I give you something to stand for that? In the future, I'll give you the 3 barrels of corn, But it's very difficult, I think, for ordinary people to say, where does the value come from in cryptocurrency? And can you just kind of let us know that?
Yeah, and the only reason why I needed to mention gold is I have to take it there, because I'm taking it there because it's now you have the fiat dollar, that's not backed up by gold. You have a fiat dollar that we all use and we value. Why do we value it? Because we say we value it. Okay, yes. So and you're still using your debit card, which is digital.
Right.
It's digital. So is it really there?
Right.
Right? Is it, and are they just creating money from the Federal Reserve out of thin air? Of course they are.
Right.
So where's the value? So if you take Bitcoin and we ask the same question, where's the value? Which is a reasonable question.
Mm-hmm.
So the value, from what I understand, it's a representation of value in the form of a record of ownership. You own it.
Uh-huh.
You own them, right? So it's being created through consensus, like I described earlier, and you have this ownership to it now. You actually own it. It's in your hard wallet because you can store your cryptocurrencies in your hard wallet. And besides, in which I highly recommend, because you are your own bank. So you have your own bank account, and that would be your bank account. So, to me, that would be the best way to describe the value of it. Again, I do feel that we also decide it has value. There is that element to that.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
so it's based on people being able to buy things with it, probably, that like if you have so
Yeah.
much in your Bitcoin wallet, then you can use that to buy a car or whatever. So that
Yes.
value comes up when there's someone willing to sell you a car based on your Bitcoin.
Exactly. And, this lends to the open source and the ledgers that I speak of. You have other coins that you talked about. And what's happening is, and a lot of them are called tokens. So the world
Tokens.
is being created into a digitalized world, which is going to be a tokenized world.
Mhm.
So it's inevitable. That's where we're going. That's where the structure. I mean, I'm working with people behind the scenes with other companies. I mean, I'm aware of the development. So the world is being developed this way, and it's going there. So this digital tokenized world will have incentives. So it's called incentivization. So a lot of these tokens will be used. Let's say a company wants to use it for buying a car. So the car has a rebate program, and it has their token called car token, which is a rebate program. And you can then use this towards your purchase of your car, but you can earn incentives towards that. They may have whereby if they want to sell the car to you, they'll bring the car to your home to view the car, to drive the car, and then take it back away. And they might use Uber for delivery service. These are examples of some of the different ways where we're going to.
But would there be incentivization though too to continue to use the dollar? I mean, because the same digital idea. So like you said, the credit cards are digitalized. Apple has a digital wallet. There's a lot of push to digitalize all of our money, whether it goes from this source or that source.
That's what they're doing. So they're getting you more into the digitalization. So then eventually, I think from what I've learned is that by 2025, the whole world will be running in this new digitalized world.
So
and
then
with currency, I would only imagine that they're going to continue using the dollar, and it'll transition over time. This will take years to transition it all over completely. I think there'll be use for it, or they may transfer it into a stable coin, which means it won't fluctuate, right? It'll be a stable dollar value, monetary value to that coin. And maybe they'll create that. I know the Bank of Canada is looking at that. I know Canada does have their own stable coin. It's called Canadian or Canada, CADT is the symbol.
Okay.
So they are creating things like that. I think it's still developing. It's still in a learning process. The banking world is still learning it. They're not familiar entirely, at least, and maybe at the very top levels they are. I mean, we don't know this.
So the other side of the money argument, is to actually have something that has actual value, a thing like real gold that has a value because it actually exists, or real silver that has a value because it's used in industry, or a piece of property which has a value because you can grow food on it and live on it. So those people that are advocating sort of like, there are several people on the conservative side particularly that are advocating investment in various properties that are real, you know. And so the guy Fabian that I was talking to was saying that in his view, money has to have a particular value, and when money was backed by gold, then it could be stabilized around that value, so that then you would know that 1 kopeck was equal to this much gold, and so it would have a definite value in trading, which, you know, he was arguing benefits people, because then the people that work hard and save and so on, they know what their money is worth. It's not always fluctuating. So I wonder if you have an idea about how that perspective, let's say having real and stable value, to property or to gold or silver, how that compares to cryptocurrency, where you have a consensual value, but it's not necessarily stable.
And the record of ownership.
Right.
I think there are coins that do have, there's a Bitcoin gold, like for instance, or Anthem gold. They do have gold that backs up their coin. So coins are created with different purposes and use cases, and there will be those coins available that will have certain intrinsic values that way to back it up, which is very interesting. But just to take this to in a broader perspective of where this is going, in my view, I think, yes, there is Bitcoin right now, which is the best performing asset in history, although it's 12 years and not as long as, you know, old as some of the other assets out there. But it has some life to it here, and it is going somewhere. But does it mean it's going to be the be all and end all? I don't know that. I think what is happening, perhaps in my vision, is that it's taking us into a different realm of how we're going to stay connected with measuring our labor and our productivity and changing our economics. Because the economics we know of only benefits the most to a few.
Right.
Whereas I'm hoping and thinking that this will benefit to everybody more on an equal platform, with the types of different cryptocurrencies and platforms that are being evolved to incentivize you how you earn your money, because there's so many different ways of now that we're going to be able to earn our money, which will be really great, because it will help those who have disabilities, who are retirees, things like that, in earning a living. Even after they retire, they can still earn money. So there's that type of platforms being designed. So perhaps this evolution is going to take us to a place where we will evolve. And of course, we will continue developing off of these. This is just the beginning. This is the pioneer stage. So I see it eventually taking it to a place where we won't need money. And we'll actually live in a world where we don't have to have money to exist.
So you think that it will lead to something like a more symbolic way of cooperating, so that people will be able to, you know, have a way of life and a purpose and a meaning that is somehow recognized in an exchange? Is that what you mean when you say without money?
I do, and I think it's an evolvement of consciousness to get there. You know, we probably won't see it in our lifetime, but I think that that's the evolution of our consciousness, where it's headed, and this is a stepping stone going there. I see that.
So you think, so you see that more connected, in your view, there's more promise in cryptocurrency for that movement than, say, you know, possessing a stable, some kind of more stable commodity like gold or silver or property. So the conversation about stabilizing money for exchange, you know, that I've had with a couple of people, those conversations were about the morality of people being able to earn a living, save money, and function with an understanding of what they have and how that their let's say property has value. And so that's a little easier to wrap one's head around, to say, if you actually have things that you can see, that then those things have value because you can live in them, or you can exchange. If you have, I don't know, a bar of silver and it's pretty stable in its meaning, then you can exchange it, you can accumulate it or whatever, instead of having something like a dollar, which might fluctuate in a week in terms of its value, But it sounds like what you see about cryptocurrency is that it might become a more cooperative system for people to really foster a sense of community or society without money itself being the let's say, intended symbol of value.
Yeah.
Is that?
I think that's fair to say it that way. I do think it's about the productivity. It will help us to become more productive as human beings, rather than having these welfare systems or this sense of not having purpose. It's helping to evolve and develop the purpose within humanity and collectively, and I think it can do that. I think it's needed. Let's say it's needed. And if we are raising if our consciousness is raising in this paradigm shift that we're going through, then I can see it going into that direction, because we do need to be productive. We need to have purpose. We are human beings. We are creative beings. And in this draconian system, I feel it hones down on our creativity. Because if we don't have our own sound mind and body, how can we truly be these great creations?
So the system that we have been in is a system where the wealth of the few controls the lives of the many. That's been the system for quite a long time. You could say it goes back to the hierarchy of kings.
And it's to serve their purpose. Why? See, again, ask the question, why do they control us? What is it they need from us? What are they taking from us? It's not just money, it's energy.
Well, if you think about monarchies from the past or kingships in a tribal situation, it would be the same, that the few people who are at the top are using the people that are under them as slaves or as those people who are meant to deliver the wealth to the top. And so the people at the bottom of the hierarchy don't have very much chance of developing their consciousness or developing their lives. They're caught in a situation of being used by the people at the top. And, it seems like democracy was an effort to break that, to make it possible that individuals could have respect, could pursue their own happiness, could have free speech, could be free to practice their religions, to break that control from the top, of the many. And you could say that the experiment that the United States made in developing a democracy, and it was very different from Canada because you guys didn't break away from the Queen. You basically got the gift of democracy from the royalty. What America did was break that. They broke they attempted to, or they said they were breaking it or whatever. And the idea being that each person in this democracy has an inherent worth and has inherent respect. Now, that was an experiment, that was made not that long ago in the development of America. It is very difficult, I think, for human beings to actually function with equality. They can have the idea of equality, but to actually function as equals where everybody has the possibility of developing requires a huge amount of this negotiation, dialogue, respecting different sides, being able to listen, being able to speak for yourself. It requires a huge amount of skill. And, you know, by and large, humans haven't risen to that skill.
No, we
And,
haven't. We've been
right.
controlled, right? And we're controlled by others, like you said, in this hierarchy, and in these entities that are on this hierarchy at the top of it, to question who they are, and then you'll have a better understanding, perhaps, of the human species. So,
Right.
you know, and that's important to ask these questions. But
you see cryptocurrency, I'm understanding, as a kind of revolutionary force for the people, for the individual, but it would have to happen in a way that requires a lot of cooperation.
Yeah, it's a window. There's a window of opportunity here. And it's whether or not you can see it collectively. We do need numbers. You don't need everybody, but you need enough numbers that if we go through that window and take it back for ourselves, because what we have done is we have given away our power. We give it willingly. Nobody's taking it from us.
No, I know that. I mean, it's all being complied with. I mean, there is social compliance that is based on fear and is developed through this kind of trance state in which you don't wake up to what you're actually seeing and hearing. But, you know, this moment where we are right now, as I talk to different people, I realize that there are different options for money. And as the dollar is recognized as being really completely separated from value, you know, it's simply a consensus for using the dollar, and it's been boosted in different ways. And as you said, controlled by the few. But there are other, you know, it's like, how is money going to evolve? And it sounds like your view particularly is that cryptocurrency is a good way for it to evolve.
It's
And
a way that I see in front of me right now. So it's that window. And if I see something in front of me right now, it's what can I do now to get to the next step? It's all about involvement at this stage, because if it's a paradigm shift and it's turning, then we're right on the beginning stages, the pioneer stages of something about to develop and go to. I mean, things can change dramatically from here, but we do have to have a foundation that is solid. But number one in all of this, regardless of cryptocurrencies and money, putting it aside, we have to go within ourselves. This is really a place, I think, where we're at and where we need to be, is to go within ourselves, truly in ourselves, to get out of this programming, to get out of this, you know, narratives that are being told how to think, and go back in within ourselves again, in our original beings, and ask questions and go within and seek truth from within and trust yourself ultimately. So that to me is probably the most important thing right now in our existence, in order to create a foundation, a moral ground to move forward with any of these technologies. These are technologies.
Right, exactly, right. So, and you know, and as we said earlier, one reason why you can make that kind of inquiry into yourself is because you did grow up with a moral, let's say, discipline. You know, you grew up in a family that was following a religion and taught you traditions and taught you also a code of ethics. And so you understand that when you go into yourself, you're not just going into self-deception or self-protection, because people can go into themselves and they just end up protecting themselves, or you know, they go into themselves and they end up just promoting their own ideas. So it's like you have to go into yourself with some rules, you know, some idea about what it means to ask questions, and what the truth is, and also with some rules about, not lying, not stealing, and not actually taking from others what you don't deserve, and so on. And it's I think partly what's confusing for people is that when they do go into themselves, unless they have some training for their own mind and they have some moral base, they can go into self-deception.
Very
It's
true.
it's
And
very easy
betrayal
to
to
deceive.
thyself is can be easily done, and the worst betrayal is betrayal to thyself.
Yeah, well, but you can deceive yourself so easily, and not only do other people deceive you, but you can deceive yourself.
Yeah,
And
very true.
so having some rules to live by, also having grown up in a tradition like you have, probably gives you a way of understanding and hearing and seeing things that you can examine your own mind and your heart. And you can do that with some confidence that you're not deceiving yourself, because I
And when
think,
you feel that, then you go back and you ask questions and you seek answers and you listen to other perspectives and
right,
you keep
right,
doing that. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I
So
would like to add something.
yeah,
There's something here in that empowerment for me as an individual and how I see myself as a woman born into this world and learning about where I came into. And, here I am, we talked about earlier, me being raised in Canada for most of my life. Well, what does that mean? Here I am in this world in Canada. Well, Canada is a country, and what I'm learning, and we talked about the Queen and democracy. Well, what I'm learning in this is that Canada is a corporation. It's not a country. So when we start to learn the structures of this world, you're learning the structures of corporations. And if you start to look at it that way, you'll start to understand better what you are in a part of this corporation. So it's a very important thing to look at, especially right now in our world, because these corporations are being questioned. And these corporations are creating a dictatorship together. And these corporations are wanting to claim you as ownership, as their product. Very important, because that's what you are by your birth certificate right. That's why you have a birth certificate, because believe it or not, that birth certificate, when it was signed for you by your parents, it does become null and void because you didn't willingly know and understand what that birth certificate meant when it was created for the corporation, because the corporation uses your birth certificate number to trade on the stock market, uses it when you sign your mortgage, and uses it multiple times every time they can get your signature and monetize on that, which is worth millions and millions of dollars. And then you get into all kinds of things like taxation and so on, and that's a whole other topic. But I just wanted to say that because is this democracy? So question these things. Very important. And it is about knowing your true natural rights as man and woman, what you're born with, because that has a lot of power.
Yeah, I think the issue again about looking at your life in perspective of what your rights are, what you sign on for when you file your taxes, or when you, as you say, have your birth certificate used by essentially what is a corporate entity. It's an entity that uses you for its own benefits. And unless you participate actively in knowing the truth about that entity, then you are passively going along with the wars that are created, with the corruption that is created, and with the outcomes that have consequences all over the world. So I know as an American, I'm very aware of the nature of American government right now and the corruption of the apparent political groups that apparently run this country. It's not even clear to what degree even the president of the United States has real power. I mean, there's a lot that's not clear at all right now.
Mhm.
And I think from my point of view, I would encourage people simply to actually ask some basic questions as you are asking, like, who is really in control of my life? How does that go? And if I sign away my rights, who am I signing those rights to? And what are the consequences of signing them? Like if I agree to certain kinds of restrictions or certain kinds of government, where does that government go next? And from my own point of view, in these recent times, as I have felt the corruption of the political parties in the United States was impossible to overcome, as an individual. I mean, I stopped voting for the two main parties a while ago. I have tried to look in a very simple way at my own life and how I'm speaking. And what am I speaking in favor of? What am I speaking against? Where am I asking questions? And again, I return to these basic precepts because I am a Buddhist and I have been now through my whole adult life a very active participant in that particular religion. But there's a very strong precept not to kill intentionally any other human being, especially, but other beings perhaps, but not to kill, not to steal from others, not to take what I'm not given, and also not to lie, not
Mhm.
to lie intentionally.
Mhm.
And so just following those basic rules, I can question a lot about what I agree to in, as an American, and as an American who does participate in the corporation because I do pay taxes. And so I have to be very clear with myself that I will speak out against the killing and against the stealing and against the lying. And that's really the reason why I do these interviews, is
Mhm.
to be able to do that, because I don't have a very strong understanding of cryptocurrency, for example, and I'm not invested in it because I think, thank God I'm not invested right now. I wouldn't be able to learn about it right now. There are so many things going on.
Mhm.
But I have property. I live I live in a very nice home.
Mhm.
That property does pay me back on many levels. I can handle it honestly. I know what I'm doing. I earn a living. I don't invest in the stock market at all.
Mhm.
So, I try to just clean up my own act
Mhm.
and to do that in a way that keeps my honesty and my value of not lying and not stealing in the forefront. And I think ordinary people can do that if they take the time to just think about what is the nature of their existence and where do they actually know what's true and what's not true, and how can you find out more. And so, like with somebody like you, I would say that if people follow you and follow your website, they'll find out more about blockchain. They'll find out more about your vision also for how
Sure.
you see
Mhm.
the world changing. And they will find out somewhat more about the government as a corporation.
Mhm.
Are there other things that you would add to that people would find out from following you?
I think just my passion to seek for a better life and my way of finding that, that is a lot of those things you just mentioned, and helping each other to share and connect and find a better way together collectively and consciously. And spirit is always in my life. It's very important to follow my creator in this, which I like to mention and speak of because to me it's the first and foremost most important thing. And without my creator, I wouldn't be here and none of us would be. So this is my view and how I see it. And so, it's to follow what I have different people that I interview on my YouTube channel, and it's to share information and to take a different perspective and hear many perspectives for yourself from a different point of view rather than mainstream media.
Right.
Where it's a little more organic, well, a lot more organic and real, in my opinion. So,
And
you know,
you seem to have hope for
I
even
do.
the
I have great hope for
yeah.
humanity. Oh my goodness, we are amazing creatures, and we are all those things you just mentioned in our true core. And we are such creators and heart-centered beings, very important. And that is a great connection to our universe and what we can create for our universe collectively.
And you feel that right now we do have this big opportunity to change and to get rid of a lot of the corruption. I mean, I know you do feel that. Sometimes I feel a little bit more despair about right now, and
Oh, I have my moments. I have my moments because we have good and evil, and good and evil always has existed and always will, and we need each other to exist. And that is very real. So I embrace the dark side and I embrace, of course, the good, the light of life, and the good and dark, the light and dark is there, and it's to be real with it and to understand it better and to know how it works and know your place in that. And that's the part of getting to know yourself again, and
yeah,
what your purpose is in this, and how we can create, and who we are. If we're born as a human being, then what are we here meant to do? What's our
right,
purpose?
right. So, I mean, I think that what I have liked about looking at your website and knowing who you are, and following you some on the YouTube also, is that you do have hope at this moment. You have hope for the transformation of humanity, and you believe that this is a special period of time where the whole paradigm is changing, and that certainly seems true on the surface, but it is also a moment where a lot of people are very, very afraid. So I think that it's you're a very hopeful person, and that people will benefit from hearing about your hopefulness. So that's one reason why I think that it's that following you about the cryptocurrency issues is particularly important.
Well, I just pray that we stay connected and we love each other, and we keep love in our hearts and for each other and for ourselves, most importantly. And
Yes, yes.
in any great change of pattern, there's chaos, and that is the part we must embrace and understand. We're here, and we're here to witness it and live through this and accept what comes with it. So the acceptance is important too. But thank you so much, Polly. It's a real pleasure having this discussion with you. You have great insight, and I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Amina. And this is a lovely moment to say goodbye for now. And I sure will be talking again in not too long.
Yeah.
And may this come together in this period of time, may it come together in a way that benefits most, if not all, of the people, and in a way that also keeps people from harm. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, dear.
Thank you. God bless. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.